Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be going over the Bitcoin miners. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so before we get into the miners, just want to show you guys some of the positions we have here. So you can see the portfolio is still up a massive 3%, even after the FOMC kind of came and threw cold water on the markets and the CPI data, which kind of sucks, but that, to be honest, that was to be expected. So you can see we still have 700 shares of btbt. See what else we got here. We still have the 300 RIOT. RIOT's actually up right now. It's in profit as of right now. Let's see. Also, HUD8 is massively up. I mean, this was just ridiculous. At one point, it was up like 16%. It's absolutely bonkers. So you guys can see this thing was up $1.07 on the day. So currently up $117, as you can see, around 100 shares. So what do we do with the other 200 shares? Well, it's complicated, but we had some, I believe, at the money calls, sell calls that we were doing that we had to close out for quite a bit more than we paid in premium, but that was actually offset by taking profits. So the profit that we took was actually more than the cost that it took us to close the sell calls, which ultimately were more expensive than the premium we received by that. But the point in case here is that the profit was more than it cost to close the positions. And then we took that money and basically rolled it over into buying 100 calls of Mara, as you can see down here. And we currently have a covered call on that. Still have clsk, so they're all up massively. We still have pretty much all of those. Now let's get into the charts here. So MACD histogram is starting to turn bullish. You can see it does look like, it's hard to see it at first glance, but it does look like the RSI is currently forming a golden cross. So that's a very good sign. You can kind of see that the bottom band here is really trying to stop the downward momentum. It is starting to shift up. This little peak here and this peak here is higher than this one back here, and the histogram is turning a lighter shade of red, which indicates a weakening in momentum, meaning that we could possibly go into another massive rip to the upside. Okay, so this has happened before. So you can see we had the golden cross back here on the RSI and the MACD. What did the MACD do before it had a golden cross? The histogram turned a light shade of red. The MACD, the purple line, ended up bottoming out, curled up, crossed over the golden line, and then we got the golden cross right as price was hitting the trend line, and then boom, took off like a rocket ship. Also, very, very similar thing back here, golden cross. RSI also had a golden cross after the purple line crossed above the gold one, right at the bottom of the channel, and then boom, massive move up. So we're seeing some very similar formation here taking place on Mara. So there's some key zones to point out here. The first thing I want to point out is that the bottom of the channel currently sits at 17. We did already test it back here with this hammer candle. As you guys know, the hammer candle does often pop up at the bottom of a swing low move. Typically, that's usually when you'll see one pop up. That's also the most bullish case scenario for a hammer candle to pop up, is either at the bottom of a move or close to the bottom of a move. Like, for example, this one right here, boom, ripped up, right? We went over the ones on Bitcoin. That's obviously significant. You can see this is a hammer candle 2 down here, all the way down here at it's hard to believe Mara was ever this cheap at $3.55. Way down there. A little red hammer candle, but then, as you guys know, the rest is history. So this hammer candle right here could be the start of another massive move up. The first thing I want to point out in terms of price is the top of this channel, which would serve as either a sell point or resistance. Actually, I need to move this resistance zone over a little bit so you guys can actually see how these two are kind of interlapping here. So this is resistance for basically these wick tops here before we get to the actual all-time high for Mara, which is pretty crazy. I mean, this thing was at $82 during the last cycle. So the thing I want to point out here, as of the current week, both the resistance up there and the top of the channel are converging with one another. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So they're converging with one another, and pretty much what this means is if this thing were just a moonshot and do like a 3x, it's likely going to get stopped up here somewhere between this trend line and resistance. So again, the trend line as of right now currently sits roughly around $55 all the way up to let's see, all the way up here to roughly about $65 or so. So that's the ultimate target we'd be looking at for this huge, massive channel you guys can see here. I mean, this thing has been basically, the channel's been going since pretty much the bottom of the crypto bear market and the stock bear market. So as of right now, we're sitting on support. Again, it does look like we might be forming yet another hammer candle. So that's always a good sign, especially at some kind of support level. So current support $18.30 to $20. The target we'd be looking for ultimately here is going to be somewhere between this 29 to roughly about 33-ish. I would say is going to be roughly about the first support, and then you have the trend line and the upper resistance areas up there as next targets above and beyond that. So there is a kind of an inverse head and shoulders pattern here. So shoulder, head, shoulder, and then we did get a confirmed breakout right here. So the target for that is just shy of the resistance. That's at 27.50. So we'll do measured moves on all of these. So from the current price to the head and shoulders pattern target is about 34% move. All the way up to the top of resistance here is going to be about 60%. And then if I measure this thing, let's say maybe, I don't know, maybe Mara gets to these highs all the way in October or something like that, you'd be looking at about $77. Again, October is kind of closer to the end of the year, which is theoretically roughly about the time Bitcoin should be breaking all-time highs. So pretty massive move here. I mean, it could potentially do some really crazy thing. Actually, if I were actually to kind of extend this out, because I want to give you guys a real good solid picture of what this could potentially look like right around the time that Bitcoin's going to break its all-time highs. Because as I've said before, I do suspect that likely these Bitcoin miners are going to have their hardest run to the upside at the same time, or roughly around the same time, that Bitcoin is pushing to its new all-time highs. And I do not think 74K is the all-time high for this cycle. I don't. I think that might be maybe like a short-term top. Definitely not the top. Just my opinion. So, if I were just to say, let's say Amara tops out like December of this year, which again, that's a possibility. I mean, this would just be crazy. I mean, it would be all the way up here, 345% gain at about $90 is what you'd be looking at. Obviously, nothing's a guarantee, but I would not consider that out of the realm of possibility. Again, the previous all-time high for Mara was $83, and this high took place in November, not in April. So the first peak for Bitcoin, Mara went to $57, but on the second peak, it actually went higher than that. So that just tells you that this first peak that we saw for Bitcoin, well, I mean, if it's not the true peak, then likely Mara is ultimately going to go higher. That's pretty much what I can gather from the previous cycle. So again, the miners are up quite a bit based on the CPI data. They were up way, way more than this, like a lot more, like 10, 15, almost 20% at one point, a lot of these. But then they kind of got watered down by the Fed, by the Fed heads coming out and talking. So again, in CleanSpark, we kind of have what looks to be like some kind of channel here. It's not perfect, but we have a channel and then also a kind of a sideways chop with a potential bull flag. So bull flag target is going to be all the way up here at $61. The channel top is, as you guys can see, as of the current price, is kind of converging pretty closely with that top up here. So that's going to be roughly about $52 as of right now. But again, we do have a long, long ways to get before we eventually get to that top. So I'll just kind of draw these out a little bit in time. So that way we kind of have a better understanding of where these could potentially go. So give me just a second, y'all. I'm trying to get this out here. So I know this looks kind of ridiculous. You guys are probably thinking, yeah, right, it's not going to go up to $156, right? And that's not even in December. Just because it's in a channel currently doesn't mean it has to stay in the channel. It could just create something else. But I do want to point out that it is possible because clsk at one point back in 2018, as you guys can see, was at $150. So it did hit those prices at one point in time. Whether it's going to do it again or not remains to be seen. But as of right now, we're kind of stuck in this coiling move. Again, this could be a bull flag. It could just be, it could be distribution. It could be accumulation. We don't know. Usually, distribution doesn't usually happen until there's some kind of top. And in my opinion, I don't think this is a top. I could be wrong. Maybe it is the top, but I just don't see that as being likely because clsk has not run up nearly as much as something like Mara did. To be completely honest, even clsk and HUD8 were pretty much at the same price. So clsk was up here at $24, whereas HUD8, if we take a look at something like that, you guys can see the swing high was also the same price. So based on that metric alone, with HUD8 being smaller, I have a hard time believing that clsk's top is actually $25. So support, we're looking at 1460. As you guys can see, resistance basically 21 to about 2350. So if I were just to measure this, let's say from the bottom of this range all the way to the top of support, you'd be looking at 63%. And if this is actually a bull flag, which it's not really so obvious, but it could be one, 322% move. RIOT. So this one is basically range bound. It's doing absolutely nothing. However, I do want to point out that it does look like the EMAs are starting to curl up on both the RSI and the MACD. The histogram is turning a lighter red color, and it is starting to kind of fade into the zero line. That's typically a very bullish signal. Plus, we have this hammer candle all the way down here at the bottom. That's also very bullish. So, not really seeing any other hammer candles other than maybe this one right here. But point in case, usually if the hammer candle is the bottom of a swing low, there is usually a pretty massive move that comes afterwards. So we have the inverse head and shoulders pattern again here. So pretty much the target for that's going to be roughly about 1650. We did get a break of the trend line, although I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of this because at this point, the price pretty much is doing nothing. It's just chopping sideways. So resistance on this one is pretty similar to HUD8. They're almost exactly the same. So 1850 to roughly about $21. So pretty much from the current price to, let's see, the resistance up here, 73% to about 95%. Again, it does appear that we might maybe, if this closes green on the week, might finally be getting to start the breakout this week on the inverse head and shoulders pattern on RIOT. So perhaps massive moves to the upside coming next week. All right, so HUD8. We got the golden cross on the MACD. That's good. We're trying to push above the break-even level on the RSI. That's also good. You guys can see that we're actually getting above this resistance from the broadening falling wedge here, which is a bullish pattern. So if this closes above, HUD8 could be set to basically fly straight up to this resistance up here. Again, resistance is going to be between $18 to about $22.80. There is also actually kind of an inverse head and shoulders pattern here, although I think that target pretty much played out right here. I was going to say something about that, but it looks like it pretty much already played out. So 10.25 would be the pullback area. Again, the pullback would basically be like pretty much nothing at this point. All the way up to the swing high would be about 120% move. So cifr is still holding this support line here, as you guys can see. It's just basically pushing up into this resistance. We saw something very similar on Soundhound when we pointed this out to you guys. So higher lows pushing into a flat top, also known as an ascending triangle. That's a very bullish pattern. Again, if it does break out, it's probably going to move pretty massively. It's hard to measure the target on this one, but I would say likely the target at a minimum is probably going to be somewhere around $13 ultimately. Again, that's a pretty big move, but time will tell. If that does happen, that's roughly about a 3x. So this is one that we're just simply not touching. We're not going to touch it unless it gets back down to the support. So as of right now, the support on this is 380. Resistance is going to be about $5 to $5.50. So if, let's say, we were to get a pullback into support, which would be the ideal entry point all the way up to the swing high up here, it's about a 47% move. So btbt, this one's actually starting to look quite bullish. So we got a break out of this falling wedge pattern here, which again is a very bullish pattern. When the wedge is going down, that usually is a bullish signal. That's a bullish price pattern. So we got the golden cross on the MACD here, golden cross also on the RSI. Everything is lining up. The EMAs are curling up. They're about ready to have a golden cross. So btbt could actually it could theoretically be about ready to fly to the moon. It's kind of looking like it. So the resistance up here is going to be 4.25 to about 480, and the swing high is at 530. So just from the current price to the swing high is about a 92% move. Let's say it gets maybe a slight pullback into the EMAs at about 2.5. The move then becomes about 113%. So bitf, we got to break this trend line. As you guys can see here, we did hold this macro trend line with this green candle right here, which held back here, and also at the bear market low here. So as of right now, it is holding at this support level. I mean, we could get into this now, but then of course there's news that bitf is getting bought out, so probably not going to touch this one. But anyways, support. I would say probably if I was going to buy this one, I'd wait for a pullback into the $2 area. But that's just my opinion. You guys can do what you want to. So $2 to 230 is support. Resistance is going to be anywhere from $3 to about $3.90. So just from the current price all the way up to the swing high up here, as you guys can see, it's a pretty fat move, so about 60%. If it does get a pullback for whatever reason into $2 all the way to the swing high up here, 95% move. So anyways, this is the Bitcoin miners. Hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see y'all later. Peace.